Wasathyahala Ikata Hrafnar. With you all health, I am Hrafnar, or Raven, whichever you prefer. This is Sigurdrifa's Prayer, Part 2 of Mimir's Well podcast and stuff. And, things and, materials that exist and stuff like that. Anyways, so, now in the previous video, I was talking about a prayer which is found in one of the Eddic poems known as Sigrdrifa, and this prayer is recited by the Valkyrie Sigrdrifa. So, again, Sigrdrifa is the wisdom sayings of the Valkyrie Sigrdrifa, which she spoke to the warrior Sigurdur in return for him breaking her from her sleeping spell, as the story is told in the Sigrdrifa poem. And again, what happens was, after he wakes her up and there's the introduction, he asks her who she is, and she responds by giving him a memory draft. And then, that's a horn of mead intended to jog his memory, basically. And I believe that that's a reference to the use of drinking horns and mead for magical practice, because there are examples all over Norse mythology of women doing things like that, giving people drinks from horns for forgetfulness and stuff like that. So I believe that this is a reference to that practice. And then after she gives Sigurdur this memory draft, and it specifies it's a full horn too, so that's important. Then she recites this prayer. Now, I'm actually just going to read the Sigurdrifa to you directly. Not the whole thing, obviously. But starting from the beginning. Sigurdur rode up on Hindarfjöll and turned southward toward the land of the Franks. On the mountain he saw a great light, as if fire were burning, and the glow reached up into heaven. And when he came thither, there stood a tower of shields, and above it was a banner. Sigurdur went into the shield tower and saw that a man lay there sleeping with all his war weapons. First he took the helm from his head, and then he saw that it was a woman. The mail coat was as fast as if it had grown to the flesh. Then he cut the mail coat from the head opening downward and out to both the armholes. Then he took the mail coat from her, and she awoke, and sat up and saw Sigurdur, and said, "What bit through the byrnie? How was broken my sleep? Who made me free of the fatter's pail?" He answered, "Sigmund's son, with Sigurd's sword, that late with flesh hath fed the ravens." Sigurdur sat beside her, and asked her name. She took a horn full of mead, and gave him a memory draught. "Hail, day! Hail, sons of day! And night and her daughter now. Look on us here with loving eyes, that waiting we victory win. Hail to the gods, ye goddesses, hail! And all the generous earth. Give to us wisdom, and goodly speech, and healing hands lifelong. Long did I sleep, My slumber was long, and long are the griefs of life. Odin decreed that I could not break the heavy spells of sleep. Her name was Sigrdrifa, and she was a Valkyrie. She said that 2 kings fought in battle. One was called Hjálmgunnar, an old man but a mighty warrior, and Odin had promised him the victory, and the other was Agnar, brother of Alta. None he found who fain would shield him. Now that's as far as I'm going to read, but basically the following verses explain why Odin had punished her and put her in a sleeping curse. But not that that's not important, it's just it's not important for the purpose of this video. So, the prayer there in the Icelandic Old Norse reads as this. Heil dagar, heilir dagsinir, heil nótt og knift, og ræðum augum lítið okkar winnig, og gefið sitjóndum sigur. Heilir ásir, heilar ásinjur, heil sjáin fjólnýtta fóld, mál og mannvit gefið okkar merum tvæm, og læknisendur meðan lífum. And again, that part translates as, Hail day, hail sons of day, and night and her daughter now. Look on us here with loving eyes, that waiting we victory win. Hail to the gods, ye goddesses, hail! And all the generous earth, give to us wisdom and goodly speech, and healing hands lifelong. Now, just so you guys know, I am reading the translation as it is presented on www.voluspa.org, which, by the way, is a really great site to go to. They are not sponsoring me or anything like that. It's just that I value knowledge and resources, and those can be really hard to find, and this is one of the best places on the internet if you want to go and study for a ton of reasons. But anyways, the link will be provided in the description. Now, I have this drinking horn here, which I recently made. Now, right now, my camera really doesn't do it justice. I need a better camera. But what this drinking horn has on it is the first verse of that prayer, or the first stanza. I couldn't fit the second stanza in there. I wanted to, but I couldn't. So I'll probably make a stand or a display of some kind that will have the second half of the prayer on it. Now, in part 1 of this 2-part episode, I guess, I went over my belief that these verses, on one hand, like I was saying, reference the use of drinking horns as a form of magic, or as a tool for magic, I guess. And also that there is a very clear ritual practice here. If she had woken up on her own somehow, I get the very strong feeling that she probably would have taken that memory draft herself, because it feels very much like it's part of a full ritual, you know, to greet the day, who here is known as Dagar, who is a very important god. with a drink from the horn, and to make this prayer, this very positive prayer, which basically sets the tone for the day. So I feel very much like this is a reference to a full-on ritual and ceremony, a prayer with a ritual act of consuming mead from a horn upon waking up, a way of honoring the god of the daytime and, all of the deities collectively, but, especially the god of the day and, the god of the night, So if anyone, by the way, has questions as to how they could implement at least what might be a historical practice or tradition for ritualistically honoring dagar or not, this would be it. To take a drinking horn and have some mead in the morning, or if you don't want to drink alcohol, you can make an oblation. You can pour the alcohol out if you want, and make this prayer, or something along the lines of this prayer. Now, I really want to talk about this drinking horn in particular and the influence that Sigrdrifa as a whole has had on my craft. Sigrdrifa has a lot of knowledge that is really important, really significant to the practice of making and drinking from drinking horns. For example, in stanzas 7 through 9, which I'll actually just go ahead and bring up, the ale runes are mentioned. The ale runes are described. Give me a second. And the ale runes are runes which should be inscribed on every drinking horn. I apologize, I'm getting used to this new phone. Not everything it does makes intellectual sense. Bear with me, please. So I'm going to go ahead and read, starting at stanza 6 in Sigrdrifa. Basically what happens is after Sigurdr drinks and after she makes her prayer and she explains why she was cursed, Sigurdr in return for breaking her curse asks Sigrdrifa for knowledge, and so this is what she does. She teaches him. So in stanza 6, starting from there, she says, "Winning runes learn if thou longest to win, and the runes on thy sword hilt write, some on the furrow and some on the flat, and twice shalt thou call on Tyr. Ale runes learn, that with lies the wife of another betray not thy trust. On the horn thou shalt write, and the backs of thy hands, and need shalt thou mark on thy nails. Thou shalt bless the draught, and danger escape, and cast a leak in the cup. For so I know thou never shalt see thy mead with evil mixed." So, what's interesting about that verse is that while she mentions the ale runes, plural, she only actually mentions one rune by name, which is the rune called need, or in Old Norse, naudis. And so that tells you something. It indicates that the person that wrote down this poem and the people that were reciting this poem for generations before it was written down didn't need to explain to anyone in their audiences at the time what the ale runes were, likely because people already knew what the ale runes were, or because it was intended for those who already had that knowledge. But the point is that it's referencing a practice that was clearly already commonly known enough at the time that it wasn't really needed to, be more specific. So if you do further research, you will find that the ale runes are 3 specific runes, Ansus, Lagus, Urus, that were actually being used as far back as I think the 2nd, 3rd centuries CE. I think I've gone over this in previous videos in this podcast, so if you've already heard this before, please forgive me. But according to my research, the ale runes were these 3 runes, Ansus, Lagus, Urus, that spelled the word Alu, that were inscribed on objects people wanted to either consecrate as sacred or invoke divine protection for. They have been found on headstones, on brackets, which is a type of jewelry, and on coins and things like that. And so that's what it's referencing. She's referencing the very old practice of inscribing the ale runes on stuff. So let me read it again, okay? Ale runes learn that with lies the wife of another betray not thy trust. On the horn thou shalt write, and the backs of thy hands, and need shalt thou mark on thy nails. So this is referencing the practice of inscribing the ale runes on your drinking horn, because the drinking horn is a sacred or spiritual object. And there she's referencing using them for protection against your wife being unfaithful, but that is more likely the influence of the people that were passing the story on at the time. So you have to think of what's actually at the root of it. Again, it's established by very old evidence that these runes were used for the purpose of invoking protection against things, So might you use the ale runes to protect yourself from being cheated on by your wife? Sure, but really what the actual root value is divine protection. And so, that sexist tone there can be disregarded when it comes to considering the actual real principles underneath this, right? So, just so people know, as a side note, we don't actually encourage that sexist mentality. We understand that while these poems are sacred, they are not infallible because they're not scriptures, right? Just to be clear on that. But back to the point, it's referencing the practice of inscribing these runes on your drinking horn for the purpose of consecrating them and for protection. And so that's what I do. My maker's mark is Ansus, Lagus, Urus, but it's also merged, it's also combined with the rune Naudis. So I do need to do some touch-ups on this because the paint smeared a little bit, but that's what that is. That's my maker's mark. So that's one of the ways in which Sigrdrifa has had a huge impact on my craft. I personally believe that based upon what she's saying, based upon the wisdom that she's speaking, her Sigrdrifa's wisdom, that every drinking horn should have these runes on them. And then, of course, there's the reference of the rune Naudis, or need. So my maker's mark is Ansus Lagus Urus, with the Lagus bound with the Naudis, because I am adhering to the wisdom here, where she's basically saying it's a good idea to inscribe the ale runes, but also the rune Naudis, for protection against poison. So, and then this, of course, is a reference to, again, a ritual practice, because she's saying here, on the horn thou shalt write, and the backs of thy hands and need, or naudis, shalt mark on thy nails. Thou shalt bless the draught, and danger escape, and cast a leak in the cup, for so I know thou never shalt see thy mead with evil mixed. So that's a reference to, a ritual practice, right? She's saying that he should do this basically whenever he drinks mead. That's the context there. She's basically saying whenever you drink mead, this would be a good idea to do. To cast a leak into your mead or into your ale, and to bless the draught every time that you drink from it, right? And just as a side note, I actually was raised Muslim, and I can actually kind of oddly relate to this from that perspective in a way. I'm not Muslim anymore. I'm heathen. I'm pagan, and I follow this. But in Islam, there's a belief that every time you eat or drink anything, you should bless it first by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim over your food, right? And this is a similar practice. She's saying that every time you drink, you should bless your drink, your ale. Now, I personally think that when she says you should cast a leek or a lauker, as it's said in the Icelandic Old Norse, into the ale, that it's not necessarily meant to be literal, just like, for instance, where she says you should inscribe naudis on your nails. It's not necessarily meant to be literal. Obviously, if you want to do that, you can, and this does imply that there is probably some mystical benefit to it. But, nail there might actually be a poetic reference to the horn itself, because horn is actually made out of the same material as your nails. And, so this might actually just be a dual reference within one stanza to the practice of inscribing naudis on your horn. Okay, maybe not dual. But, it's a reference to that, I think. And as for casting lauker into your ale, that might actually just be a reference to the act of inscribing the Ansus Lagus Urus runes onto your horn, because Ansus Lagus Urus spells alu, which is the origin of the word öl in Icelandic Old Norse. It's ale, right? So the Proto-Germanic word for ale was alu, and the first letter, the first rune that would spell the word lauker would be lagus. And so lagus is the rune that's literally in the alu. It's the middle rune, right? And so in the very act of inscribing Ansus Lagus Urus, you are in fact, in a way, casting the lauker into the alu, the leek into the ale. So while there could be some medicinal and herbological benefits to casting a leek into the ale, and there are, I can do a whole video on that. At the same time, it's not necessarily literal. So, for the non-literal, for the metaphorical interpretation of this, to me it amounts to what I'm doing, which is inscribing the Ansus Lagus Urus runes on the drinking horn as a way to bless the horn itself and invoke divine protection from it, and the rune naudis on it for protection against poison and evil. And, as for my spiritual practice, whenever I drink from my drinking horn, especially if it's mead, I do what she says and I bless it. And I will do this every time I drink mead, because this is the idea that she's giving. That's not just on special occasions. It's every time you drink mead that you should probably do this. Now, while I do feel like she is probably referring to verbally blessing the mead as you drink from it, at the same time, if you go back to the earlier parts where, she gives a memory draft to Sigrdrifa and then she makes her prayer, that could actually be an indication that she might not even be referring to doing a verbal blessing over the prayer, because you notice that when that happened, she actually just gave him a horn that was already been prepared and full of mead. And so, you could imagine, since she's saying that these things should be done, that you should have these runes inscribed on your nails or on your horn or whatever, that it's logical to conclude that she probably has those runes inscribed on the horn that she's passing to Sigurdr for him to have his memory draft, his drink from. And so this would likely indicate, therefore, that the horn is already blessed and the mead is already blessed by these runes, which is the whole point of what she's teaching him anyways, the use of runes for magic and sorcery and spirituality. And so I think that while it could indicate the practice of a verbal blessing being said over the mead, which actually could have been what she was doing when she recited that beautiful prayer, it most likely indicates that you don't need to do a verbal blessing over the mead and or the horn before drinking from it, because by having the runes on the horn and the mead are already blessed, right? So, every drinking horn I make is influenced by this. Every drinking horn that I craft is blessed for protection against poison, against evil, and also, I guess theoretically, against unfaithful wives. I would actually say really just protection against evil in general, because anybody can be unfaithful, right? But really, further deeper study would say that it really isn't specific to just that. It's protection against evil, period. People being dishonest with you, people being mischievous with you, because you can imagine, like, the kind of person that might try and poison your mead is probably the same kind of person that might, lie to you or deceive you or whatever, betray you, etc. So, you can kind of see that there's a common vein, I guess, or a common concept at the core of both of those things, right? A wife cheating on you is someone betraying you. Somebody putting poison in your mead is also somebody betraying you. So it's really about the root concept there. It's protection against poison and evil, against toxicity, and deceit and stuff like that, protection against evil. So yeah, I'm gonna finish up with just summarizing, that Sigrdrifa as a poem has had a huge impact on my craft, and also on my spiritual practice. Today, actually, for the first time, I actually did what I feel is a literal in practice manifestation of what I've gleaned from these verses. I got up today and I filled my horn fully, because it says a full horn, with mead, with a horn that is blessed with those runes, and I recited that exact prayer, and I drank my mead and I made my prayer and I greeted the day and I started my day that way. And I think that this is a very valid and potentially very useful, mentally, emotionally, and physically and spiritually healthy practice that you could probably implement in your daily life, and in your spiritual practice. So, if you have any further questions about this practice, or things relating to the runes and things involved, go ahead and comment, and let me know. And I'm going to end this with an announcement. I happen to have a huge sale going on my Etsy shop, which is linked below in the description. Basically, until June 2nd, if you buy 3 items or more on my Etsy shop, you get 50% off your order. And yes, you can buy custom drinking horns made by me, like this one. Not this one specifically, but like this one, and as you now know, you can trust that my drinking horns are made with magic, with the magic of Sigrdrifa the Valkyrie. Thank you so much for watching my podcast. Again, if you have any questions, please comment below, and thank you so much, and have a wonderful day or night. Grow strong and think deep.